106 editions spanning over more than a century, while remaining a great and eagerly awaited sporting event. To earn this longevity, the Giro's been able to excite new fans generation after generation. It did so also thanks to some cyclists capable of conquering people thanks to their incredible feats. Men like Fausto Coppi, Gino Bartali, Felice Gimondi, Francesco Moser, Marco Pantani. So, Vincenzo Nibali came from Sicily, and once again ignited passion and pride for Italian cycling. Like the greats, Nibali won. He accepted the challenges that the bike offered, looking for a feat, the emotion, the beauty of the climb. Vincenzo Nibali reiterated the magic of cycling, and he did so with a particular style. Because while many others have won, not all victories are the same. The mountain has a simple rule. If you want to go further, you can't go around it. You have to get to the top. This is in Cima, the greatest Giro d'Italia climbs. Produced by Dogge in association with Agenzia ICE for an appreciation of the best that Made in Italy has to offer. Episode 9, Tre Cime di Lavaredo, the stage that crowns the champion. The shark comes from Messina, the son of a man who had a special relationship with bikes, which can be summed up in that phrase repeated to his son: the bike is freedom. He saw the first Giro on television. That was the time of the Russian Tonkov, and he faced his first climbs as a kid, on the roads outside the village, pedaling to escape the farmers' dogs. He then witnessed the rise of Pantani, rooting for the pirate, competing in the first races. He continued to run in his native Sicily until a proposal came. He was still very young, not even 16, when he decided to move to Tuscany. It was an adventure, a gamble, a bet, fueled by the desire to continue racing on two wheels. The young Nibali left home, went many kilometers further north and studied, applying himself, learning everything he could. He made his way through the juniors and then moved on to the under-23s. He's been a professional since 2002, when he began to obtain results and climb the standings of major stage races. His first Giro dates back to 2007, when he finished 19th. The following year, he finished 11th, then 3rd in 2010, then 2nd in 2011. So 2013 could only be the year of his consecration. The 96th edition started in Naples, passed through Calabria, and then continued up towards the northern mountains, with the final finish line in Brescia. It was a year of unusually bad weather in the north of the country, and the organisers were forced to rethink the stages several times. It was snowing. It was too cold. The Alps were impractical, impassable. Climbs that would have surely given a show came off the track. The team's strategies had to be changed in an atmosphere of general uncertainty. The surprises that the race had in store weren't only geographical. Nibali was among the favourites, but those who expected a battle between him and the British Wiggins instead saw the shark show his indisputable superiority stage after stage. Bradley Wiggins, winner of the Tour the year before, stopped on stage 13. Shortly before, the Canadian Isdale, winner of the 2012 Giro, also dropped out of the race. Nibali showed off that aggressive attitude that earned him that nickname, dominating from the start and keeping the Maglia Rosa for 14 days. Until the end, when that Giro, redesigned as it was happening because of the cold, came to the last mountain stage on May 25th, 2013. The adverse weather conditions had convinced the organizers to stop the race just the day before. Climbing to 2,600 meters with a double climb to Passo Gavia and Passo dello Stelvio wasn't possible. The mountain had had its say, forcing the riders to stay in hotel rooms for an unexpected rest day, and the eagerly awaited mountain stage was skipped. Reasons of common sense and responsibility, of course. But then there are also the reasons of the heart. There'd been an uphill time trial in Polsa, but the Shark was still longing for a great mountain stage, one of the epic ones. It could have been the double Gavia and the Stelvio, but no. In 2013, Nibali arrived in the right conditions, and he needed the right way to express himself. Very close to the end, all that remained with Tre Cime. One last chance. That May felt like October, if not November. The day included a flat start and then 4 climbs. Those to Passo Costalunga and Passo San Pellegrino, Giao and Tre Cime di Lavaredo. It rained below, but the water turned into ice at that height. It was cold, but the Shark had other things on his mind, and he already proved it on the first ascent. Nibali had already been to Tre Cime in 2007. He knew what he was fighting against. As the road climbed, he pushed. He felt that he had unfinished business with the Giro, and with that stage in particular. He passed Tre Croci, while in the meantime the others competed for the Maglia Bianca, the one that goes to the leader of the under-25 standings. Bentancur gave us a thrilling moment. He had to stop because of a bike problem, when he still had time to recover, luckily for him, and got back on track with the support of the team. But not only. Colombians were united to help him, perhaps remembering compatriot Luis Lucho Herrera, who won at Tre Cime in 1989. Those were other struggles, which went on while Nibali flew decisively towards the finish line. He did so with regular accelerations no one could match. Methodical, implacable. 3 degrees below zero, 600 meters of gradient with peaks of 18%. And then, that cruel cold. At the beginning of the climb, perhaps he underestimated the situation and took off his poncho. He was wearing only a shirt, in the storm among incredibly sized snowflakes for that season. 3 kilometers from the finish, he pushed again. Nibali was a pink and light blue spot on the asphalt strip that crossed an expanse of snow. It seemed he was racing through a cloud. The wind was strong. A blizzard. That's the term used to describe the mountain that day. The 3 Colombians stayed behind. Fabio Duarte tried to follow, but couldn't. Thirsty for victory. That's how the Shark was described. He tried to stretch his fingers. His hands seemed numb from the cold, despite the gloves. It was his face, his and that of his fellow racers, that showed us what was happening better than any weather report. The whitened helmets, ice accumulating even on their eyebrows. The great adversary was the cold. And immediately, memories of other days on that same mountain come to mind. In 1968, in the shadow of those same unmistakable Tre Cime, another champion showed us what he was made of. It was Edouard Louis Joseph Merckx, known as Eddie, and shortly afterwards known as the Cannibal. He'd come to that year's Giro among the favourites, but cycling had not yet recognised him as unattainable and incomparable. Even though he was world champion, his ability to handle a multi-week race with infinite variables was still in doubt. He'd make sure to clarify everyone's ideas on the matter. At the start of the 12th race, Tre Cime di Lavaredo, Merckx and the others in the race surely remembered what had happened just the previous year, when the snow and the cold had descended on the race with such violence that the public had felt the need to intervene and help the racers. Between pushes and interventions from the public, it was no longer possible to say who'd really won. Vincenzo Torriani had no choice but to not count the finish order, penalising Gimondi, who arrived before Merckx, Motta and Adorni. 1 year later, at Tre Cime, were the same men on the pedals, with the same risk of snow and frost. They started from Gorizia, and who knew what had happened beyond those 2,000 meters upon arrival. The race had spiced up immediately, with a group that started to push early, very early, when there were still 140 kilometers to go at that 213 total to the finish line. Even then, Merckx evidently didn't like having someone in front of him. In fact, he went in pursuit on the Passo Sant'Osvaldo climb, and it was his sporting director who better advised him, reminding him that the road was still long, and some energy had to be kept in his legs for later on. The Belgian listened to him and waited for the right moment, which came 15 kilometers from the end, in Van d'Alzey. Faema's men pushed on the pedals, showing the leading group that the race was not over yet. The result was yet to be decided. Then, when they realized that Gimondi was struggling to keep up, the cannibal's instincts became irrepressible. He flew, leaving behind Jimenez, Motta, Balmamion. The two teammates from Faema, Adorni and Merckx, followed him, but the more they advanced in pursuit of him, the more challenges appeared in front of them. It was the cold. Going up the Alps, the wind also increased. Temperatures dropped, and it started to snow. Adorni brought his teammate as far as he could, who only had to catch up with the very first riders, which he did, unceremoniously. He overtook Pitossi, Cuorematto, Galera, Polidori, who saw him emerge from the clouds and diving right back into the clouds, straight towards the finish line, to which he was now aiming from first place. The public, numb despite the heavy jackets, witnessed the triumph of the Belgian with his impossible name and the fatigue of Gimondi, who perhaps, on June 1st, 1968, got an idea of the kind of opponent that would accompany him for the rest of his career. The chronicles of that day narrate that he came to the end with tears in his eyes. Unlike the year before, that of 1968 was an undisputed and undisputable victory. Merckx crossed the finish line and was rescued by a group of Alpini who put a blanket over his shoulders. He arrived at 2,333 meters wearing gloves and with his arms bare. They took him to the Auronzo refuge and warmed him up with a hot bath. Tre Cime di Lavaredo, hidden in the clouds, became the place of his consecration. The mountain that screamed to the world that the cannibal had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again. 45 years later, those same snow-capped mountains crowned another king. Destiny separated Nibali from some stages, but left him with that climb, a legendary climb in the history of the Giro. And there was certainly something of Merckx in Vincenzo Nibali's expression as he reached that goal, lost in clouds and snow. There was something of the Belgian in his solitary arrival, and in his desire, perhaps the need, to put his name on that stage. Vincenzo Nibali won. He did so in the Maglia Rosa. He did it like the grown-ups, commented the journalists. It was almost difficult to tell who crossed the finish line next in a group, but there was no doubt about the first. It was him, the shark, Vincenzo Nibali. The bad weather that took something away from the race ended up adding a lot to his victory. Because it wasn't just the climb that made the shark's feat great, but also the conditions in which he raced. He arrived out of breath, confused by fatigue, stunned by the cold, yet proud. aware that he deserved it all. Without even getting off his bike, he entered the heated tents. They took him there by pushing him to allow him to change and take off his soaked clothes. "You couldn't see anything," Nibali would say about those moments. "I just wanted to get to the finish line as quickly as possible." A phrase that reminds us of another. "I went fast to shorten my agony," uttered by the pirate Pantani, his boyhood idol. Things don't always go as they should. In sports in general, and in cycling especially, due to the enormous complexity of the race. Yet sometimes they do. Tre Cime di Lavaredo on May 25th, 2013 is one of those cases. In an edition that some define as halved, due to the cuts imposed by the cold, Nibali still managed to get what he deserved, stealing a whole year as a leader with a spectacular end. He did so with a mountain stage, finally, full of memories and references related to other great cyclists. He did so by winning in an undisputable way, facing not only the climb, but also a snowstorm. He needed it. That was the comment of the reporters, while the shark aimed for the finish line with a style that left no doubt about his intentions and his potential. Just like in '68, also in 2013, despite the snow, the icy air and the wind, the fans and enthusiasts lined up behind the barriers and around the finish line to see him pass, to shout his name, to witness the consecration of another of the greats of cycling, who marked a turning point in that strange year with his victory. And the crowd was also large the following day, on May 26th, when Nibali entered Brescia, the last stage of the race, followed by Rigoberto Urán, Cadel Evans, and then Michele Scarponi in fourth place. A fourth place behind the shark that tells us how cycling is indeed an individual sport, but often fought with the help of teammates. In Spain, they're called aguadores, meaning those who carry water, otherwise known as wingmen. In 1968, Merckx had Adorni on Tre Cime. Everyone had their own, even Nibali. Men who run like champions on the same mountains for those same long weeks. They do the same amount of effort, shouldering the responsibility of moving forward at times to give respite to those who face the final sprint. Without aiming for victory, however. They have to understand their place in the race, how to protect the captain from the road and from their opponents. They provide water and food if needed. They even give up their bike if the captain's bike has had a problem. In this case, they withdraw, leaving the strongest to compete for victory. For some, racing as a wingman is a first step in playing the role of captain. This is the story of Jan Ullrich, Chris Froome, but that's not the case for everyone. Most remain gregarious, destined to run, go fast, and suffer uphill to allow someone else to win. After the victory of Tre Cime di Lavaredo, Nibali said something very true and very beautiful. The last kilometers were hell, but he endured and won, also as a sign of respect for his teammate who'd worked to bring him there. It's the other side of sports, the one that's much less known. The glory of cycling can be fleeting. It's fleeting for those who dedicate a life to it, remaining in the shadows of others, of those who perhaps only manage to conquer one stage and have to be satisfied with that. It's even more so for the public, who wait for hours in the cold at 2,000 meters to see their favorite cyclist go by for just a handful of seconds, and that's it. Just long enough to shout, "Go!" The true champions, after all, are those who undo the curse of transience. As was the case for Nibali in 2013, one of those rare cyclists, defined as complete because he's always been able to give his best, from the time trials to the climbs, as well as the descents. It was clear that Nibali would still be talked about, a lot, because of the way he got to the end, after showing his superiority on every front, in the 19 stages he raced through Italy, and then for how he utterly won in the 20th, marred by prohibitive weather. With one day to go, wearing the maglia rosa, climbing Tre Cime, Nibali offered us a moment of wonderful spectacle. This is his style. After that Giro, the king of Italian cycling continued to offer us unforgettable days. He finished second in the Vuelta, which he won in 2010, and finished fourth at the World Championships in Florence. He won the Tour de France in 2014, achieving a feat that's been reserved only for a few greats. He's one of 7 cyclists who can boast all 3 major races in his palmarès. A feat that was achieved by proving that he had strong legs, a good heart, and a clear mind. You can win in many different ways. Nibali won the 96th edition of the Giro in the most beautiful way, conquering it in the 3,339.8 kilometers covered, but also by treating us to that epic penultimate stage, climbing Tre Cime di Lavaredo. He won and deserved it, without a doubt. He won by entering people's hearts and renewing the magic of cycling. In Cima, the greatest Giro d'Italia climbs, is a Giro d'Italia podcast produced by Doug A, starring Daniel Tanner, executive producer Marta Donà and Carlo Lenotti. Written by Valentina Camarini, with the editorial support of Giacomo Botto. Directed by Marco Ferrarini. Producer Irene Oriani. Sound design and original music by Pasquale Lo Savio. Recording Dario Cuomo. Artwork Andrea Lodetti. English adaptation Diego Ferrarini. Special thanks to Silvia Forestieri, Eva Visentin and Simone Pozzi.
Una produzione Dog Ear.